A taxi driver took a midnight ride, in the heavy rain. When he arrived, a crying millionaire widow whispered, "Please, stay with me tonight." The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It was past midnight, and the streets of Chicago glistened under the soft glow of streetlights, their reflections distorted in the ever-growing puddles. Kareem, a 57-year-old taxi driver, rubbed his tired eyes as he pulled up to a quiet intersection. Business had been slow that night, and fatigue tugged at him like an anchor. But he had one last ride request, a pickup from an upscale neighborhood where townhomes stood like silent sentinels behind wrought iron gates. As he drove through the narrow, rain-drenched roads, his thoughts wandered to his daughter back home, her college tuition still unpaid. He had picked up extra shifts to make ends meet, despite the aching in his back and the long hours behind the wheel. His job was often thankless, but sometimes, it surprised him in ways he couldn't forget. When he pulled up to the address, he saw a woman standing under a porch light, her hands trembling around a thin silk shawl. Her elegant dress clung to her figure, now damp from the rain, and her makeup was smudged from tears. Kareem quickly stepped out and opened the door for her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently, holding an umbrella over her. She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten she called a ride. Her voice was barely audible, a breath more than a whisper. "Please, just drive for a while. I don't want to be alone." Kareem nodded and helped her into the back seat. He didn't ask questions. Years behind the wheel had taught him that sometimes people didn't need answers. They needed presence. He began to drive through the city, slow and steady. The woman stared out the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. "My name is Helen," she said after several minutes of silence. "My husband, we buried him today." Kareem's heart sank. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Helen gave a sad smile. "Thank you. He was a good man. Kind. Quiet. We met in college. He built everything we had from the ground up. Tech empire, real estate, investments, he was always building. And I was always at his side." Kareem listened, his eyes flicking between her in the rearview mirror and the road ahead. "I've had people around me all day. Lawyers. Distant family. Investors. But when they left, the silence was unbearable." Her voice cracked. "The house felt so empty. I thought if I stayed there tonight, I might break." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "Would you mind, just staying with me tonight? Not for anything improper. Just to talk. I can't face the silence alone." Kareem hesitated. He had never received a request like this in all his years of driving. But something in her voice, the raw grief, the trembling vulnerability, moved him deeply. "I'll stay," he said softly. "Let's get you home first." When they arrived at her house, a grand brick mansion with ivy-covered walls, Kareem parked the car and followed her inside. The foyer was beautiful but cold, filled with expensive furniture and fresh flowers that seemed out of place in the sorrowful air. Helen led him to a sitting room where a fireplace crackled softly. She offered him tea, which he accepted, though it was clear she needed something more than company over drinks. She curled up in a corner of the couch, holding a velvet cushion to her chest. "You know," she began, "we weren't supposed to have children. The doctors told us it was nearly impossible. But one day, at 42, I found out I was pregnant." We were ecstatic. Her lips trembled, and Kareem leaned in gently. "She was born prematurely, and only lived for 6 hours. I held her the whole time. My husband, he was never the same after that. He poured himself into his work, and I poured myself into keeping him afloat." Tears streamed freely down her face now, and Kareem's own eyes began to sting. "I can't help but think," she said, "that maybe he never stopped grieving. Maybe neither of us did." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but deep, the kind that honors pain and respects it without judgment. Kareem finally spoke. You know, I lost someone too. My wife passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. She fought hard, but it took her anyway. And I drove this taxi to pay her medical bills. Still do. Helen looked at him, her eyes wide with empathy. How did you survive the loneliness? I didn't, Kareem said simply. Not at first. I got lost in my own grief. But then, one day, a passenger told me their story. Then another. And another. I realized the world was full of people carrying invisible pain. And maybe, just maybe, being there for others would help heal me too. Helen let that sink in. The rain tapped gently on the windows, and the fire gave off a soft warmth that curled around them like a blanket. Hours passed. They spoke about love, loss, and the small things that still made life beautiful, a child's laugh, a warm cup of tea, and unexpected kindness. For the first time in weeks, Helen smiled. As dawn broke, casting soft gold light through the tall windows, she turned to Kareem with gratitude etched across her face. You didn't have to stay. You could have just dropped me off and gone home. Kareem shook his head. Sometimes the greatest service isn't in the fare, it's in being human. Before he left, Helen handed him a small envelope. This is not payment, she said quickly. It's gratitude. And, a request. I want to fund your daughter's education. You've given me something tonight no one else could, not lawyers, not therapists. Just presence. I want to give something back. Kareem opened the envelope later and gasped. Inside was a check large enough to pay off his debts and secure his daughter's future. But more than that, he carried home something far greater, the profound knowledge that a simple act of kindness on a rainy night had changed 2 broken lives. In the end, it wasn't about wealth or grief or even tragedy. It was about the unseen power of sitting beside someone in their pain. About staying when it's easier to walk away. And about the quiet truth that sometimes, in giving comfort, we find our own healing. That rainy night, 2 strangers found hope not through grand gestures, but through shared silence, a warm fire, and the bravery to whisper, please, stay. And sometimes, that's all the heart needs.